Well, good morning. We have folks who are still joining us, but it's my pleasure to welcome you to our September 2nd Community Circles and Conversations uh, edition here. And I just want to go through again our goals for this series. So, we set up community circles and conversations in response to sort of everyone being a little bit isolated during COVID-19, working remotely, working under a lot of stress. So we created this virtual series to build trusting relationships and share knowledge and resources with the Central Iowa nonprofit sector. Our expectation is to center our dialogue around those common goals and remain rooted to equity and inclusion. And just a note of housekeeping, and it seems like we might have some newer folks joining us or a bigger group today. So I'll just remind you to please mute your audio and to turn off your video. I almost said TV. Turn off your video for the first part of our session, and that just helps us to focus in on our presenters for the day and not have all the distractions of everybody's video and potential audio going in the background. So that's just something that we try and set up and helps us keep everything pretty focused. So I'll kick off with some announcements and updates. I am so excited to announce a free training that we will have that we will be hosting on October 14th. It's going to be kind of in that lunch and learn time frame. We're calling it Fired Up Fundraising, and we will be welcoming virtually national consultant Susan Howlett, who is the author of this book you see the cover of, Boards on Fire. The topic is really on how to fuel and fire up your board for their role in fundraising. We know that times are uncertain right now, and that individual giving is an extremely important part of nonprofits' sustainability and stability. And so Susan is going to do a virtual session for us, and I'd invite you on our events page on the Community Foundation website to check that out. The registration is live, so I'd invite the audience for this being nonprofit executive directors, also development staff, and even development committees and board members. Who are some of your board members who are always telling you, well, can't you just apply for another corporate sponsorship or a grant, and that'll make up the difference? And challenge them to participate in a session like this that really helps them understand the potential to serve as an ambassador, a friendraiser and fundraiser on behalf of your organization. It's a great little book, and so I'd recommend checking that out if you have a chance as well. So just a reminder, if you're joining us, to please mute your line. Thank you so much. And I might have to just go through and mute some folks who are not yet on mute. We'll go ahead and do that real quick. If you haven't had a chance to mute yourself, that'd be great. Thank you. And then we will get started here in just a second. So our agenda today is to talk with 5 local funders and just talk with them about their reflections on the grant making world right now. I think, everything is so uncertain, and, we have a group called Central Iowa Funders Forum where we're meeting monthly and we're talking about kind of trends in grant making and best practices and, sharing information about what's going on in our community. And, we benefit from building those relationships. And that was part of the inspiration for starting community circles as well. So I'm going to call in some of our funder friends in just a minute, from that group and from our local grant making organizations to reflect on behalf of kind of the broader set. Of course, sometimes I like to put a little humor in here. So you'll notice I have a little cartoon. It says, well, what do you expect when you took a job at a foundation? So maybe that's a little nonprofit humor. Maybe it's a little bit of a dad joke. I don't know. All right, and then after we have our main presentation, we'll have some time to network together in breakout sessions, and then I will come back with network updates at the end. So just kind of forecast what we'll be doing in our next community circle. So again, you can ask questions in the chat if you need to, and I will be monitoring that, but I would love to invite first Beth Jones to share her video. And I just want to say that Delta Dental, as COVID hit and funders were trying to figure out, what they could do in light of the pandemic, Delta Dental, really quickly came out with some response to COVID and kind of what was happening for nonprofits. So Beth, I just invite you to unmute, or I'll unmute you. I think you can probably do that. Oops, I think we're both clicking at the same time. Sorry. I'll let you do it.
Perfect.
There you go. Beth, do you just want to tell us a little bit about Delta Dental first, and then kind of where you are in this moment and what you're learning?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. A quick 20-second, what is Delta Dental of Iowa Foundation? Delta Dental of Iowa is a not-for-profit 501c4 health services organization. And that means that we have a social welfare mission, and we really meet that mission through the work of what we call community impact. And our key way of giving through community impact is our foundation. And our foundation for many years, starting in probably about 2012, was really focused on cavity-free kids and access to care for older adults for dental care. And over the last couple of years, we really shifted and began to look at how we could better represent some of the work that our parent company does, which is our sole donor. And really looking more in the wellness space and the connection of oral health to overall health. We are a statewide funder, so we only fund in Iowa, but we do fund statewide. So we spent all this time developing a strategic plan for beyond 2020 and what we were going to do starting in 2020 to start looking forward and really focus on oral health, integration of oral and overall health and overall health. So you can imagine as a health funder, we had started to go across the state doing some community conversations, talking to nonprofits, which were quickly halted, obviously in March. And you can imagine as a health funder, with a focus on equity and a focus on system change, we quickly felt like we needed to respond, but we also quickly saw some of the major equity issues that were occurring within the pandemic. And so, our first step, I will say, I kind of will outline for you quickly, we're at month 6 of a pandemic, and I come from public health. And so I sometimes bring the real focus, and most pandemics last us 18 to 24 months. And even with a vaccine, we hope to get ahead of that number, ahead of that curve, but I compare it to a marathon, and we're maybe at mile 8. And so we have a long way ahead of us. And so as a funder, we've tried to look at what do we do right away? What do we do midterm? And then we're still thinking, what do we do more long-term? Knowing that we've relied heavily on our nonprofits to provide relief. So our first and foremost goal, we looked at food insecurity. I think a lot of your funders, you're going to hear that. I think we thought we were going to help support nonprofits do their work, and what we found in about 300 applications in 2 weeks was people just needed money to buy food. And to support the food banks. And so we did a lot of food relief. We did a lot of relief for urgent health needs. And that was about $500,000 that we distributed within the first really 2 weeks, probably the end of March, first week of April. And then we did an additional $360,000 to all of our community health centers and dental nonprofits. So most of you are probably familiar with it. Dental offices were shut down for quite a long time. And that meant that those community health centers were not bringing in any revenue. And they really do serve they fill most of the gaps for those who are uninsured. And so that was important for us to just help them pay their bills. We knew we weren't paying for dental care at that time. We knew we were paying to help support them to stay open. And so right now, I would say we're kind of like looking at that next phase. So this fall, we're hoping to come out with a couple more funds. One really focused on health equity and how organizations and nonprofits are supporting those most disproportionately affected by COVID. And so there's a lot of work that's going on, a lot of good nonprofits doing that work, and how can we invest some money into the work that they're already doing. So we're not looking for new projects, we're looking for partners that we can help support. And then we're also looking at a second level of relief for nonprofits, really focused on scenario planning. How do we keep supporting all of those nonprofits that are doing good work? We will always have a health focus, but really this could be about, do we need funds for a merger? Do we need funds to pay our bills because here's the work we're doing? So it's really about that next level of relief. And then I think just looking forward to 2021. So I started with well, it could be 18 to 24 months. Let's hope it's not. Science has come a long way. So let's look at that as our worst case scenario, but let's think about what we're going to do in 2021. And we go into budgeting, this fall for our foundation. We've already added an additional 500,000 to what we're going to distribute this year, but really raising up the amount that we will distribute next year and looking at what do nonprofits continue to need. And so we try really hard, those of us on our team, to get out to community conversations like this so that we can really hear what's going on and try to respond to those needs. So hopefully, as we move forward through the fall, we'll continue to learn what's going on. I think that next level of health equity and scenario planning may be a continued focus for the long term. We'll see what we get from all of you. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. I know
Yes.
I hope that that's helpful for the partners to hear too what different budgeting cycles are and kind of how far you have to think out. And
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciate kind of the public health lens that you're also bringing to this work. And I know I've had the opportunity to talk with Anna about how we can work together, and that's been really exciting to see what Delta Dental has done, and really the element of listening to the community that you guys have leaned into in this time. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I will be then welcoming Matt McGarvey. And Matt, I'm going to share your video and get you started. And then, Matt, what's interesting about Telegen also is that you have the multi-state lens, right? So you're operating not just in Iowa, but Oklahoma, and is it Illinois or Indiana?
Illinois and Colorado
And
also.
Colorado. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have had the pleasure of serving as a guest reviewer for Matt for Oklahoma in the past, I believe.
Yeah.
And so if you wanted to share, I think you just have that interesting, we know what's going on in Iowa and you're a little bit more broadly based. So if you wanted to share a little bit about Telegen and your focus, and then kind of some reflections on this time and how it's impacted your grant making.
Yeah, thanks, Brianne. And thanks for having us. I think the thing I'd say too, similar to Beth, is just like figuring out how to have grace in something that's going to take quite a while, I think, for us to get through. It's not a political statement. I think it's just a reality. And just figuring out what this looks like for the long haul. As Brianne said, we fund across Iowa from a statewide perspective, Illinois, Colorado, and Oklahoma. And each one in this has had kind of different fits and starts and waves of things that have gone on within the nonprofit sector. Early on, we decided to carve some funding off of our existing 2 funding cycles or vehicles to do some immediate relief. And those took the form similar to Beth in from a food insecurity standpoint. We provided funding to the food bank associations or individual food banks across all 4 of our states. Again, from our board's perspective, just trying to figure out a way to have maybe the most immediate impact and something that was a pressing need. And then just given where we originated from a provider lens, a provider well-being and quality standpoint, we're from Telligence, our originating organization's roots, decided to do something more in the space of like provider, frontline healthcare worker resilience and mental health support. So not universally, but that kind of also then took the form of working with some of the different medical societies and alliances around our states to lift up some programming that they wanted to do, but in the midst of this obviously was unresourced or unplanned. So trying to step into that space. Then a small gift to United Ways of Iowa just to support the 211 efforts as kind of an information clearinghouse for any and all things that were needed in this space and in this time. So those were some of the more immediate things we did. I think now we're trying to think through what kind of an intermediate response to all this is and can be and should be. There are no magic bullets. There are no one size fits alls, especially trying to be a good partner across 4 different states. The thing I'd say, we just did a survey with our applicants and finalists and grantees so far to date for this year. And the things that emerged there, we put out some topics just to see how sort of the voice of the customer would rank some of these things, and ended up in a space where resiliency for underserved populations was sort of the top vote getter. Client mental health needs, food insecurity and hunger were the next 2 tiers down. Mobile health delivery, and then similar to Beth, like not thinking the worst, but like thinking through what nonprofit capacity supports might be needed, whether that be merger, whether that be finance planning, scenario planning and assistance. That was ranked high as well. Staff mental health and resilience, I think, was the next one that was of interest. And then more data for health solutions, whether that be telehealth or distance learning, and figuring out, everybody had to figure out something to use in about 2 days, and it's working, but if you had it to do over, would you do it differently? Or now beginning to sort of evaluate its impact. Those might feel like big things. I think for next year, we're thinking through maybe for the next 2 years, like having a good portion of our funding be available for kind of an intermediate response to all of this. It doesn't sound like much, but figuring out how to rebuild our processes so we can accept proposals all year round from all 4 of our states, rather than funneling it by certain dates for certain states, and trying to make that a more minimalist kind of an application, single stage approach. Longer term, I think we're looking at things, Beth and others are involved in something called FIND, to try to resource where providers might go to underserved rural areas. We might actively contemplate how to do a mental health professional loan repayment program for the long haul. In the more immediate term, trying to think through some things that might, again, look at sort of a next stage or telehealth kind of consulting assistance. All that's, I guess, on the table. And then also trying to figure out how to not convince my board, but get them to think through 5% distribution being the minimum, not the maximum. And they're a good group, and they're thinking through that, but trying to understand the house is on fire. So figuring out that now is the time, it's the rainy day. So figuring out how to help nonprofits. I read something from the Nonprofit Times about 2-3 weeks ago. They had an article where, it's possible that up to 1/3 of nonprofits could cease to exist. And I don't feel like that's the case necessarily in Iowa, at least at this stage, but in other parts of the country, that does feel like a real reality or potential reality. So just figuring out how to be the best partner we can at this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I appreciate so much of what you said, and I want to call out a couple of resources that we've had in this series that are related to what you were talking about, Matt. We had our last session with Lisa Cushett from Iowa ACEs 360 talking about the trauma, kind of like how to do trauma-informed supervision. And so for folks who are working with frontline employees, especially who are working with populations that are vulnerable, there's the secondary trauma that's taken on, especially during COVID. And there's some resources that we have out there of just different ways to think about supporting your employees. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about scenario planning, because kind of way at the beginning, we had a session on scenario planning with Courtney Durandi from TDT, just kind of talking about assessing the financial implications and scenarios and kind of that business element for resiliency. So I can make sure that, if you check on our COVID-19 resources, that should still be up there for those who are listening, and really good, helpful information. And that's a lot of what, our adaptation grants and strategic collaboration grants have also been trying to address. They're kind of in adaptations. We saw a lot of telehealth early on. And then, in strategic collaboration, we're funding those exploratory conversations towards mergers and some of that consolidation that we know is happening in the sector. So appreciate, your lens beyond Iowa, Matt, and kind of the trends that you're seeing nationwide, really, or in our region. So thank you so much for sharing that. I'll next call in Molly Giller. From Polk County Housing Trust Fund. And Molly's relatively new to the trust fund scene, but you have been joining us regularly in community circles, so might be a familiar face to this group. Molly, I have seen the trust fund in news lately regarding evictions, and just wanted to learn a little bit more about sort of where you guys are in this moment.
Yeah, so, and I'm new, so I just keep telling people that and hoping for grace from a lot of people still. But one of the things that makes us really unique is that, I sit on this side of things as a grant maker, but I also very much sit on the side of things as a fundraiser. So the money that we give out into the community, unlike, say, a corporate foundation, is raised in the traditional fundraising sense completely. So, yeah, we've been in the news a lot for a few reasons. One is the Undesign the Red Line exhibit, as well as, a lot of what's going on right now with evictions and the end of eviction moratoriums. And I'll kind of talk about that a little bit, but in terms of our grant making, that comes entirely just from charitable dollars. So, whereas the exhibit Undesign the Red Line was a sponsorship raised and kind of gone to that. And Eric right now is really working very hard to, he's down at the courthouse right now, meeting people. And so the moratorium essentially, during this time when there was such huge unemployment and a literal pandemic where you don't really want people out and about, and it increased numbers at homeless shelters. It didn't forgive rent during the period that there's a moratorium. It just kind of puts it on pause, and then that rent comes due when the moratorium ends. So we've seen both local as well as federal moratoriums end, and basically landlords, coming to the doors of tenants who maybe have not been employed and have seen the extra $600 leave their bank accounts and saying, "Where's my rent?" since, April 1. So, for many people, that is just not a feasible option right now. I think a lot of us know people that live paycheck to paycheck, and when you don't have revenue coming in, it's hard to make those ends meet. And so there's a great op-ed about it recently, but about just, what happens when you're faced with that. Do I eat or do I have shelter tonight? Choice that you have to make. But those are dollars that come from other revenue streams than dollars that we raise in the community. Just very honestly, we don't have enough charitable dollars that would really support, rental assistance. And so that's something that we haven't taken on in the past, but that is something that as an organization, we're asking, is that something that we need to play a role in? And right now the answer is yes, that as a housing leader, we are working very strongly with the Board of Supervisors and different organizations like Home Inc. and Impact to who they are the ones that usually are working with people more less acutely to help with assistance. But, you know, for a lot of people right now, this is the first time they have not been able to pay rent. And so they don't know that those resources exist. So we're able to connect them to those long-term options, but just get them, you know, continue to be housed today. And so that's what Eric has been working on. And from my perspective, the dollars that we give out into the community are called our programs and supportive service dollars. So, and like I said, I sit with one foot also in the are we going to raise enough dollars this year category, and having a lot of the same conversations and anxieties that a lot of the people on this call, a lot of you are having internally. And on the other side of things, we're a grant maker. And like, you know, Matt mentioned and Beth mentioned, a lot of thoughts around, okay, what we're hearing today is not what we're going to hear in 6 months or 12 months from now. So how do we meet those immediate needs? So the first thing that we did is just talk to all of our partners and say, you know, what are you seeing and what are you hearing and what are your needs today? And for a lot of our partners, you know, they're the ones that are working with people, they're client facing. And so services that were face-to-face, case management, keeping people housed who maybe have a diagnosis of mental illness or are, you know, just for any number of reasons need a little bit of extra support, those services could no longer be face-to-face. So how do we help you continue to provide those services in a setting that is safe for both the client as well as the provider? So we did a lot of, you know, phones, like kind of quick data plans, things like that. But like Matt, we also said, like, how's your staff doing? So a lot of thinking about the service providers as well as the clients. So I think to some degree, we're a little bit past that immediate. We do make clear, you know, that we sit in the housing space, and there are a lot of wonderful conversations and things happening around food insecurity, and we try and look at it just from our lens. And the one thing I'll say is that, you know, thankfully we've had a lot of fingers already in the equity work that's going on in the committee through the Red Line exhibit. But I would say where I see us going is like digging in so strong in terms of that. I am not sure today that that really means that who we fund or what we fund changes, as much as I can say I know that how we fund will change. And just, you know, the conversations that we have with potential funders and current funders, are we doing it in ways that we know to be equitable? Are we having people at the table that have lived experience for where the dollars are going? Is it an application that we know is as accessible to people with lived experience as those, you know, who have the master's degrees and know how to fill out the grant application and do it really nice so that, you know, in the way that funders like to see it. So I really would say I have a keen eye for that. And the last thing I'll say is, like, if you haven't listened to Nice White Parents on NPR, it's a podcast, and I'm not a parent, but it is cringeworthy, and it has really opened my eyes to some of the things that I do. And I think I'm a pretty knowledgeable person with equity. Some of the things I hear myself say as a fundraiser that are just not good, not super aware. So like, I'm trying to think about that.
Thank you, Molly, for kind of lifting up that equity lens that I think funders are, you know, getting awake to woke to work, as a term that we've been using. And I did want to call out, I'm sure Angie will pop it in the chat. She's been doing a great job of popping things in the chat, the For Equity tool. So at moments of discernment, funders, I know we've been using that in our grant grant making committee process, that tool. Nonprofits, as you're looking at how you're designing your programs and kind of making decisions, boards, if you wanted to take a look at the For Equity tool, I'm sure Angie can pop that in for us. And we always love a good podcast recommendation in this group, Molly. So thank you. Next, I will go ahead and invite Julie on. And Julie, I'm going to ask to start your video. And thank you so much for being with us today. We know that there are some funders who are kind of in the corporate space and the insurance space who have sort of a different funding mechanism than others. And we kind of know you've been impacted, and so I just wanted to invite you to share a little bit about kind of what you're learning and where you think you guys might be going in this time.
Well, thank you very much for having me this morning. It's good to hear from everyone, and they have brought a lot of good points to my attention. So Prairie Meadows is different. We're a nonprofit casino, so we're not a foundation. So basically, what that means is our revenues every year is what we give away. So after expenses, what we have left over is what we give back to the community. It's, the pandemic has changed things for all of us. To give you an update of where we are as our business, we've lost, when we were closed, we lost $90 million. And during that time, because we value our employees, we value the community, the board of directors and our president, Gary Palmer, have run such a great business that we're debt free. So we were able to take care of our employees through July. We paid all of their health insurance. Currently, our restaurants are still closed, our event center is still closed, and our bars were closed last week. So with all of that, we still have a great business going. Our casino is doing well. What we've done is we put all safety of our guests and our employees at the first, that's our priority. So everybody that comes into Prairie Meadows to gamble, they have to have their temperature taken and they have to have a mask on. And so we have all of the cleaning in place to keep it safe. We've got petitions between machines because our business is how we give back. The success of our casino is how much we can give back to the community. So right now our priority is to take care of our contractual agreements. Annually, we give back to the community through charitable, and our contractual is $37 million, and that's based on our revenue. And so this year we still will be able to make our contractual, which for those that don't know, that is with the city of Des Moines, Polk County. So the Polk County dollars that we give is what impacts like the Polk County Housing Trust. And then those dollars are given through the Polk County Charitable, and they use them for other human services through Polk County. And that average, that's based on our revenue, but annually it's been around 26 million. And so we're very happy that we can continue based on, and like I said, it's based on our contractual and what our revenues are, that we can make those commitments. Our charitable dollars, our grants, we still are currently on hold, but we usually don't give those out till the end of the year. So that's when at the end of the year, we'll identify how much that will be. We'll give out something, it's not going to be at the level that we have done historically because, business volumes are down. So with that, the other thing is, we've really committed to making some lasting legacy grants in the community. And so during this time, it's really been nice to watch those open. The Urbandale Miracle Park that we funded opened this week. The skate park is energetic. That's being built downtown, and that's exciting. And that's a project that we have funded. The Riverview Park is one that we funded multiple legacy grants to that, and they are making progress during this pandemic. So I think there is some great positive things happening in this community, and it's been great that Prairie Meadows has been part of that. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is really taking a look at, I'll have to make some tweaks to our program. Historically, organizations applied for multiple grants. We may have to limit that they can only apply for one, which will require the organizations to prioritize what is the most important thing for them. And what else? And the only other thing I wanted to say is, human services are extremely important during a pandemic, but I also, Prairie Meadows funds arts and culture, education, and economic development. And we will still look at all 4 areas because we believe to have a vibrant, healthy community, all of those things are important.
Thank you so much, Julie. And I'm sure Sally, who's next in the list, will be so happy and cheering that you said arts and culture, because she's really been, stressing that the value of that sector as well. So I think that was extremely helpful just to hear kind of what the position that you're in and what you're anticipating. And I know that, the Community Foundation, we pivoted our leadership grants this year to do adaptation, as I had mentioned, some of those kind of mini grants, immediate need, and then now strategic collaboration grants, which Bravo, Sally, I know has been partnering with us on some of those. So thank you, Julie. I'll call in Sally next and ask you to join us. And Sally, let me know. I'm going to see and make sure that you, let's see, we'll get your video and we'll unmute you. We'll get you going. There we are. All right, Sally, did you want to share a little bit? Because I think you're in, somewhat of a similar position as Prairie Meadows, of your revenue, sources being impacted and that kind of trickling into the grant making capacity that Bravo has. So if you just wanted to share a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I took a little bit of a different take on this presentation, just in terms of funders are people too, and we have learned some things as we go. We actually had an extended conversation in our office this week about just getting that money machine from Chuck E. Cheese, where it all just flows like this, and letting people come in and just grab, because that might be the best we can do this year. It's just a challenging time for a lot of reasons for a lot of us. Bravo is a Greater Des Moines Regional Arts Council. We leverage public resources to advance regional cultural objectives. We do that primarily as a grant maker. We do other things. I won't spend a lot of time there, but we just want to make sure that our community is really committed to arts and culture and the role that it can play. But to Julie's point, we are also a nonprofit, and not everyone knows that we are 100% funded with hotel motel tax dollars. So as a funder, we were as immediately and dramatically impacted as all of the organizations that we support. And I'm very proud of what we did to continue to support the organizations in our community, honoring grant commitments and things like that. But from a lessons learned perspective, I just wanted to share a couple of things about our operating model that might translate to other, to other organizations. So for starters, a single revenue stream you have no control over is a pretty risky play. And I wouldn't advocate that as a financial model for most nonprofits. We definitely saw that in the 2008 recession, and we're clearly seeing it now. Our lag will be long on this. This remains a strategic choice that Bravo makes. We do it because we don't want to compete with the organizations we were formed to support. But we also have to look ourselves in the mirror every day and acknowledge that choice and the consequences of that choice. So really, it's just about being aware of the threats that you face with whatever your funding model is, and continue to actively choose those things so that you don't end up feeling caught off guard. Another major lesson learned for us was that financial planning really matters. Because we have no control over our revenue stream, the perception may be like the money will come or it won't, and we'll spend it and we'll do it as it happens. We developed, that's obviously not smart financial planning, so we developed a sustainability policy about 18 months ago. We went through, I mean, I can't even tell you how many final drafts we went through and presented, and then you live with it for a little while and you're like, oh yeah, you can't do that. And we actually had one thing that we committed to that we like do. So it evolved as we went, but that is 100% of the reason we were able to do what we were able to do over the course of the last 6 months to support the sector and frankly to stay alive. We did not have to cut any funding. We did not have to cut any staff for the first 6 months. We were able to advance payments, and it's all because of smart financial planning. And so I think there's always a lot of conversation about succession planning in terms of staff. I would just encourage nonprofits to also be thinking about succession planning and sustainability in terms of financials. As funders, we also need to make a commitment to looking at cash reserves or capitalized lines of capital and not being like, oh, well, they have all this money in the bank, so we don't need to fund them. Like, you need to have that money in the bank for when things come up. So that was a good lesson for us. Another lesson for us is that trust really matters. Bravo has always been a general operating support funder, and COVID has been a great example to other funders that you can both be accountable and flexible at the same time. But that is all because you trust the partners that you're investing in. And one of the best things about our community is the relationships that we have with our partners, and anyone who's funded by Bravo knows me, knows Nicole, knows Amy. They know us, we know them. We trust them enough to fund them, and we trust them enough to spend the money on what is best for their organizations. And we're really proud that that has played out over many years, but certainly also in the last 6 months. And then the last thing, in the spirit of funders are people too, is humility. It has been a monumental exercise in humility. I'm extremely proud of the role that Bravo plays in our community and for the organizations. We're a significant driver of economic impact and quality of life. And but the organizations we support are facing immense challenges. And while we will absolutely continue to do everything we can to support them, both financially, strategically, personally, whatever we can do, at the end of the day, it has been very humbling to remember that we are only a small part of any organization's success, and that the future is not up to us to define for anyone. And so that we have spent a lot of time being reminded about our role and the contributions that we can make. Mm-hmm. So those were my 4 lessons learned.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Sally, for that vulnerability. And I think that that ties into our next slide, which is our breakouts, which are going to be a little bit shorter, but I didn't want to cut anybody off because there was some really good sharing happening in this first half. So we do have breakout rooms that we'll go into for about 15 minutes. And what we're looking to ask is, you know, how have your conversations or relationships with funders evolved or changed, and what resources are you looking for at this stage? I don't have breakout leads assigned in advance. So if you have, when we come back to the main group, if you have some themes that you wanted to lift up for us, you know, that would be something you'd be welcome to pop into the chat, either privately to me or to everyone. So to participate in the breakouts, I'll give you a second. For those of you who are joining us, the easiest thing for me to do is to have you put a room number, just the number, like a 1, a 2, or a 3 in front of your name. So change your name on Zoom to reflect the breakout that you want to go to. And then I can go ahead and assign you and give you a little bit of time to talk to each other. And then we'll come back here and just do kind of some final time. I normally also have a main room topic, and I won't have anything in particular in the main room, but if you want to hang out with me and talk a little bit more about, you know, anything to do with what we talked about this morning, or, you have any other questions. Allison, I have you as 3, but I don't see any other 3s. So I might just invite you to come to the another one of the rooms, maybe the room number 1. So I'll just assign you. You'll get to hang out with some development folks and make some new friends. All right, so I'm getting folks assigned. I have a couple of you who haven't indicated a room, so we'll hang out in the main room. I'm going to open it, and I'll bring you back in about 15 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I could tell from the participation that you guys probably could have had like another 10 or 20 minutes to talk, it looked like. So I'm sorry to have to bring you back and bring our session today to a close, but I wanted to just end on a note of appreciation to our presenters today, our funder friends. Funders are people too. So just to kind of harken back to that first cartoon I put up, sometimes we are in a similar situation, deserving of empathy as our nonprofit friends and partners. So thank you again to those presenters and to all of you for participating, sharing in the breakouts, and sticking with us. I wanted to look ahead to September 16th will be our next community circle and conversation. We will be covering intersectionality in a conversation with Matt Unger, who's CEO of DMARC, and Rayma McCoy-McDeed, who's Executive Director of Central Iowa Center for Independent Living, and a national consultant in both the race equity and disability equity spaces. So I think that'll be a really cool, interesting conversation between those leaders and how they're working together. And I think it'll be another great opportunity to kick off some more information about United Way and the 21-day equity challenge as well. So we'll probably talk a little bit about that opportunity. Again, just wanted to remind you to check out the Community Foundation's events page. If you aren't yet signed up for the 3rd Wednesday series, go ahead because there's a different login than there is on the first Wednesdays, and get registered for the September 16th. And then while you're there, check out our registration page for our Susan Howlett event coming up in October. Boards on Fire is her book. Really knowing that in this uncertain time, there will be really a need for board members to understand and be excited about and empowered in their role as ambassadors in helping to raise funds for the organization, and the role that individual giving can play. So thank you. I just invite anybody who wanted to share their own announcement or any other kind of notes to pop it in the chat. And just thank you so much for being here today. And we look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks.